In this video, we are going to look at subtracting mixed numbers where the fractions have unlike denominators. Now, if you have the companion resource that goes with this video, we are actually going to go through all 10 of the practice problems that are on there. If you do not, then you will have 10 practice problems that you can work through. So we're going to jump right in because this video is going to be a little longer than normal. So we're going to dive right in. So we're going to start out with 8 2/4 minus 3 3/5. Now the first thing I have to recognize here is that I have unlike denominators. So because I have unlike denominators, and I'm going to have unlike denominators on all of these problems, so because of that, I have got to come up with a common denominator. So the easiest way for me to do this is to simply multiply the two denominators together. Now there will be some cases where we could do something a little bit different, but if we just get in the habit of multiplying the denominators, that's a method that we can use anytime, and we don't have to worry about trying to figure it out. So I'm going to set this up a little differently so that I can work across. All right, so I need a common denominator, so I'm going to multiply my denominators. So the 4, I'm going to multiply by 5 to give me 20. And the 5, I'm going to multiply by 4 to give me 20. Now remember, whatever I multiply the denominators by, I must also multiply the numerators by. So 2 times 5 gives me 10. 3 times 4 gives me 12. All right. Now we have a problem here because I cannot subtract 12 from 10 because 10 is smaller than 12. 12 is greater than 10. So I need to regroup. I need to borrow. So I'm going to change my 8 to a 7. And because I'm pulling one whole out here, I'm going to add one whole here, but my one whole has got to have a 20 as the denominator. So one whole, if I've got 20 as the denominator, is going to be 20 over 20. So this one whole that I borrowed, I'm just sticking it over here. So that's going to give me 30 20ths. And then I'm just going to move my 12 20ths over. All right. I'm going to come back over here to the left, and I'm going to subtract my whole numbers now. So 7 minus 3 is going to give me 4. And then I'm going to come over here and subtract my two fractions. So we got 13 20ths minus 12 20ths. And so that's going to give me 18 over 20. All right. Because 18 20ths is not in its simplest form, I need to simplify it. I need to reduce it. So I'm going to do that simply by dividing both top and bottom by 2, because they're both even numbers. And so that's going to give me 9/10. And so my final answer is 4 9/10. That's going to be my final answer. Okay. Leave that up just for a second so you can check your work. And as I said, we're going to go through all 10 of the practice problems that are on the companion assignment. So I'm going to go through these a little bit quickly. If you need to back up and go back through and watch the steps again on a particular problem, feel free to do that. All right, so number 2 is going to be 8 1/2 minus 3 1/4. So this one is a little bit easier, and I could just use my 4 as my common denominator, but I'm going to go ahead and keep with the process that we've been doing, and I'm going to multiply my denominator. So I'm going to make it a little bit harder, but I want to stay consistent on the process that we're doing. All right, so we're going to multiply my 2 times the 4 to give me an 8 for my denominator, and 4 by 2 here to give me an 8 denominator. So whatever I do to the denominator, I need to also do to the numerator. And so I'm going to end up with 4/8 and 2/8. Now this one I don't have to regroup on, so I can just subtract my whole numbers. So 8 minus 3 gives me 5. Subtract my fractions. 4/8 minus 2/8 gives me 2/8. And then I need to simplify 2/8. Divide both top and bottom by 2. So I get 1/4. And so my final answer is 5 and 1/4. All right, on to number 3. So number 3 is going to be 8 3/4 minus 2 1/2. So again, I could use a 4 as the common denominator if I wanted to, but I want to stay consistent with our process. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply my denominators again. So I'm going to multiply my 4 by 2 and my 2 by 4. So my common denominator is going to end up being 8. Whatever I do to my denominator, I also have to do to my numerator. So I'm going to get 6/8 and 4/8. All right, I don't have to regroup here, which is good. So 8 minus 2 gives me 6, and 4/8 minus 2/8 gives me 2/8. I can simplify 2/8 by dividing top and bottom by 2. So my final answer ends up being 6 and 1/4. And again, I know I'm going quickly right now, but I'm trying to get through all 10, and I don't want the video to be too long. So if you need to go back and look through the steps, feel free to do that. All right, let's look at number 4. So number 4 is 9 1/10 minus 4 3/4. Okay. Again, I'm going to multiply my denominators in order to find my common denominator. So I'm going to multiply my 10 by 4 and my 4 by 10. So my common denominator will be 40. Whatever I do to the denominator, I must also do to the numerator. So 1 times 4 gives me 4, so I end up with 4/40ths here. 3 times 10 gives me 30, so I end up with 30/40ths here. Now, unfortunately, 4 is less than 30, so I'm going to have to regroup here. So my 9, I need to borrow from, so it's going to become an 8. And then I need to add my 1 whole, but my 1 whole I've got to write as a fraction with a 40 as a denominator. So 40 over 40, I'm going to add that to my 4/40ths to give me 44 over 40. Pull my 30/40ths over. And now I can subtract. So 8 minus 4 gives me 4. And then 44 over 40 minus 30 over 40 is going to give me 14 over 40. Now because both of these are even numbers, I can simplify. So I'm going to divide top and bottom by 2 because they're even, so I can always divide by 2 there. And I'm going to end up with 7/20. So my final answer is 4 7/20. All right, let's go on to number 5. All right, number 5. So number 5, I have 6 2/4 minus 4 1/3. All right. Again, I'm going to multiply my denominators to come up with my common denominator. So I'm going to multiply 4 times 3, and then 3 times 4. So that'll give me my common denominator of 12. Whatever I do to the denominator, I must also do to the numerator. So 2 times 3 gives me 6. 1 times 4 gives me 4. All right, I don't have to regroup here because 6 is greater than 4, so I can do that subtraction. So I'm going to end up with 6 minus 4 to give me 2 for my whole numbers. And then 6 twelfths minus 4 twelfths will give me 2 twelfths for my fraction. Now, because both are even, I need to simplify, so I can divide both by 2. And so my final answer is 2 and 1/6. Now the problems we've done so far, most of them we have been able to divide by 2, but that might not always be the case, depending on what your fraction is. When you simplify, you may have to divide by 3, top and bottom, by 5, by 7. It just depends on the fraction. All right, let's go on to number 6. All right, number 6, 7 and 1/4 minus 2 and 5/10. All right, so we are going to, once again, for our common denominator, we're going to multiply the denominators. So I'm going to multiply 4 by 10 and 10 by 4. And so my common denominator is 40. Whatever I do to the numerator, I must also do to, whatever I do to the denominator, excuse me, I must also do to the numerator. So 1 times 10 gives me 10. 5 times 4 gives me 20. All right, now here, because 10 is less than 20, I'm going to have to regroup. So my 7 will become a 6. And that one whole that I'm pulling out, that's going to become 40 over 40. I will add those two. So now I've got 50 40ths. I'm going to pull over my 20 40ths. And now I'm ready to subtract. So 6 minus 2 gives me 4. 50 40ths minus 20 40ths is going to give me 30 40ths. Now I can simplify this fraction. Now because they're even numbers I can divide by 2, but these are also multiples of 5 and they're multiples of 10. So to shorten my steps, I'm going to divide top and bottom by 10. So that's going to give me 3/4. And so my final answer is 4 and 3/4. All right, on to number 7. So number 7 is 8 1/2 minus 2 1/3. Again, I'm going to multiply my denominators to find my common denominator. So 2 times 3, and then 3 times 2. That will give me a common denominator of 6. Whatever I multiply the denominator by, I must now multiply the numerator by. 1 times 3 gives me 3. 1 times 2 gives me 2. So I've got 3/6 and 2/6. Now I don't have to regroup here because 3 is greater than 2, so I can just subtract. So 8 minus 2 gives me 6. 3/6 minus 2/6 gives me 1/6. Like that one. Didn't have to regroup and didn't have to simplify. All right, on to number 8. So number 8, 6 and 4 tenths minus 1 and 1/2. All right. So once again, and again, we could use 10 as our common denominator here and just multiply 2 times 5. We could do that, but I want to stay consistent with our process because I know some of you guys, some of my students, you're struggling with this process a little bit. So I want to stay consistent. So we're going to multiply the denominators like we have done. So 10 times 2 and then 2 times 10. So our common denominator is going to be 20. Whatever I do to the denominator, I must also do to the numerator. So 4 times 2 gives me 8. 1 times 10 gives me 10. Because 8 is less than 10, I must also regroup. So my 6 becomes a 5. Got to borrow 1 whole from my 6. So that 1 whole, because 20 is my denominator, is going to be 20 over 20. So we add that 1 whole to this fraction, which will give us 28 twentieths. Move my 10 twentieths over. And now I'm ready to subtract. So 5 minus 1 gives me 4. 28 twentieths minus 10 twentieths gives me 18 twentieths. All right. Both of these numbers are even, so I can divide by 2 because I need to simplify. And so I end up with 9 tenths, and my final answer is 4 and 9 tenths. All right, on to number 9. All right, for number 9, we've got 7 and 1/2 minus 4 and 1/3. So I'm going to multiply my denominators by one another. So 2 times 3, and then, oh, I'm sorry, I wrote that down wrong. There we go. So 2 times 3, and then 3 times 2. So my common denominator is 6. Whatever I do to the denominator, I must also do to the numerator. So 1 times 3 gives me 3. 1 times 2 gives me 2. So because 3 is greater than 2, I am ready to subtract. No regrouping or anything. So 7 minus 4 gives me 3. 3/6 minus 2/6 gives me 1/6. I like that one. Another one I didn't have to regroup or borrow, and I did not have to simplify. All right, last problem, number 10. So number 10 is 7 and 1/2 minus 1 and 2 tenths. Once again, I could use 10 as my common denominator, but I'm going to stay consistent. We're going to still multiply our denominators to get our common denominator. So 2 times 10 and then 10 times 2. So my common denominator is going to be 20. Whatever I do to the denominator, I must also do to the numerator. So 1 times 10 gives me 10, 2 times 2 gives me 4. Because the 10 is greater than the 4 here, I do not have to regroup or borrow. So I'm ready to subtract. 7 minus 1 gives me 6. 10 twentieths minus 4 twentieths is going to give me 6 twentieths. 6 and 20 are even numbers, so I can divide by 2 because I need to simplify. It's going to give me 3/10, and so my final answer is 6 and 3/10. And as I've said before, we went very fast through these problems, mostly because I was going to go through all 10. So if you need to go back and take a look at these, feel free.